Hello, my name is Alan Foos. Now let me emphasize that the Big Bang Einstein relativity model of the universe is the hoax that, or swindle, that prominent but long forgotten scientists had claimed. Just give me the benefit of the doubt until you've carefully studied this video and my book Upperland. Yeah, I know it's professional suicide to call out Einstein, but my mission is to enlighten you, not impress you. That's why I wrote the book Upperland, which explains how this mess all came about. So most likely the structure of the universe was not understood at that time, and this myth was accepted to appease the masses and rake in more tax dollars. And this isn't to say that everybody doesn't believe this Einstein stuff, and that's such a tragedy. Those conscientious scientists who objected were probably silenced because nobody had a real model to offer. And so the myth of Einstein became the reality. And now it appears to be too late to change that. We've been relentlessly hammered with Einstein and Big Bang propaganda for generations, and it's difficult to penetrate through all of this and extremely difficult to interest anyone, even though the correct model should be the most important scientific discovery ever. So I'm doing this video in the earnest hope of better explaining the real model of the universe. And my earlier videos were animations. They were difficult to do, and they seem to confuse viewers. So this one isn't animated. If you have a degree in math and science, you should be able to grasp the truth of this model if you really try. And I absolutely guarantee that your efforts will earn you a rare and wonderful enlightenment, illumination, satori worth more than all the gold you could ever find. This may be your only chance, our only chance, to help pull science out of a black hole and rescue humanity who would otherwise be doomed to perpetual ignorance. I guarantee that Einstein is wrong. So please pay attention. This isn't a theory, it is the holy grail of physics. But you gotta sweep your mind entirely clear of relativity. Einstein and the Big Bang, you'll never be able to grasp it. If you can't fully reject those things, completely reject those things for a while, stop the video and go away. So in this first frame, the universe is a blue ellipse. In reality, the universe is a sphere, but this ellipse is easier to illustrate. So keep that in mind. You see here an image of the Earth, a ruler, a Doppler image of the wavelength of light. You know what Doppler is all about. If you don't, go away, study it, and come back. And you see a clock. The guy in the Doppler image, let's say that's you. As you know from freshman physics, light consists of waves similar to sound. So if things are moving away from each other, you'll see a shift towards the red. It's called the Doppler effect. If they move towards each other, you'll see a shift towards the blue. Shorter wavelengths, squeezes them all together. So understand that cosmic expansion entails the expansion of every point in space. At least in our model it does. Probably not the mainstream's illustration of raisins in a pile of dough where the distance between the raisins increases, and the raisins are not considered to be occupying space. But we're not talking about raisins or steel balls or fishnets. We're talking about celestial bodies and the distance that increases them as the universe expands. So in this true model, the raisins occupy space and expand with the universe so that internally there is zero change in dimensions or any other kind. Everything stays the same, you see, because everything inside the sphere expands along with it. Follow along carefully, because these next two frames are the key to understanding the universe as it really is, and not the standard model of physics. And I have to say, this is not an easy thing to explain. To know that it's right Well, it took me 50 years before I finally was able to iron out the contradictions and be able to understand it. And it hit me all of a sudden when I finally had enough time to think about it. And so follow me and I'll explain to you how the universe really works. Thank you. Now in the second frame, the universe is expanded. Everything is about twice as big. Be careful to note these changes. With real cosmic expansion, the ruler is now twice as long. Matter itself occupies space. However, the clock is also running twice as fast. If you check the natural definition of length, you will see it depends on the distance traveled by a fixed number of wavelengths in a second. If the clock were not running twice as fast, the ruler would not change, but we know that it does. We can see this from outside the universe, but not inside. This was proved by many experiments, most notably the Pound-Rebka experiment, which purported to prove Einstein's relativity by demonstrating that clock speed slowed at lower elevations. If the clock runs half as fast, the standard meter must be half as long, because this is how length is defined. We can see the same thing happens from our perspective outside the universe, or what is called a remote viewer in Einstein's parlance. But inside the universe, the local observer, even though the meter expands or contracts at the cosmic level, clocks and meters remain fixed on the internal, or may I say physical level. Excuse me. So, a principle or a fact, as the universe expands on the cosmic level, internal measurements remain fixed. There is no perceivable change of any kind. What about the change in color from blue to violet? This is the most critical piece of evidence that has led physicists to wrongly conclude that the universe has expanded. The Doppler shift towards the red means that the Earth and you are receding away from each other. Therefore, the universe is expanding outwards from a Big Bang. Right? Must be. Wrong. This is crucial. So pay close attention. On the outside of the universe, we see that as it's expanded, and the Doppler shift tells us this information. But internally, a meter is still a meter, and the distance between you and the Earth is exactly the same. So there can only be one explanation. Light, having no mass, travels outside the universe where the expansion is observed, but not inside the universe where distance and time are fixed. That's the only explanation. Within the universe, there is no expansion. Dimensions and other physical relationships are fixed. The size of the universe is fixed within the universe. And that means there never could have been a Big Bang, at least not as a result of cosmic expansion. Not cosmic expansion as we call cosmic expansion. And I knew this decades ago, but was so indoctrinated that I believed the universe must be expanding internally, and that turns out not to be the case. But we'll talk about that again later. So the next frame is the same, but without the smaller universe nested inside. Note that distances have expanded as observed remotely, but since the clock is running faster, the known fact of physics and not my invention, that the distances remain the same. There is no expansion within the physical universe or physical dimension. The Doppler shift of larger wavelengths is offset by increased clock speeds, so that as far as we, particles of matter, are concerned, there never was and never could be any expansion or Big Bang, at least not based on cosmic expansion. So dimensions on our level are fixed. Carefully note that the density of the larger universe is less because the universe is expanded on the cosmic level, but there is no measurable change of density, or force of gravity within the universe, as would be the case if the physical universe were expanding, the universe that we see and that we perceive. Okay, so now we have a third frame, and it repeats the same observation. The universe expands roughly double once again. And now, as an outside observer, you see that length and clock speed are roughly 4 times larger, and density 1/4 than originally at least observed from outside, but nothing within the universe has changed. And these facts are proved by the Pound-Repke experiment and other experiments purporting to prove Einstein's relativity in the Big Bang. But then there's that pesky increase in wavelength, seen within the universe, and the background of the clock and Doppler images you see are also outside the universe, because this is where light travels and clock speed changes. Nothing changes inside. And so this is where these things are happening, not inside the universe. I hope you can see that. So as local observers, as we are, made of mass, we see no changes whatsoever except the Doppler shift as light travels outside the physical universe, which tells us that expansion is occurring, but not on our level, or on our level, but we don't perceive it that way. Our measurements are that everything remains fixed. Now, this is a fact of experience, okay? It's not a trivial matter. No matter how much the cosmic universe shrinks or expands, it's all the same to us inside. So, but the fact that this is Doppler shift actually occurs is denied by the physicists, who simply call it gravitational redshift. Okay, now let's talk about the cause of gravity and Newton's third law. This is something you've probably never heard before, so listen carefully. If you aren't following me so far, go back over prior material or just give up. I need the support of people who can understand these things clearly. Now, the next crucial point is how the force of gravity is equivalent to the Doppler redshift observed internally as a result of cosmic expansion. This also is proved by the Pound-Repke experiment. As light travels away from Earth, it accelerates and undergoes a Doppler shift towards the red that is precisely equivalent to the opposite rate of falling objects. This is extremely odd, is it not? Because there is no reason, unimpeded, uniform expansion should have any effect on gravity, nor does it. The key is Newton's formula for the force of gravity. Force equals mass times acceleration due to gravity. This tells us without question that the universe must expand at an accelerating rate. It has to, or there's no gravity. Newton's third law of gravitation states correctly that every action produces an equal and opposite reaction. So if the expansion accelerates at the rate of the speed of light per second, then an equal and opposite force must be exerted in the opposite direction of expansion. Nor can it be a coincidence that this equal and opposite force is exactly equivalent to the acceleration due to gravity, so well explained by Newton. So as light leaving the Earth accelerates at 9.8 meters per second, what's pushing? Nothing. Expansion of the Earth is pushing the light away from the cosmic dimension, and that is causing the equal and opposite reaction of gravity at the same rate on the Earth in our dimension. So there's only one possible inference. That the universe expands at an accelerated rate that is precisely the force of gravity. We see that clearly within the universe. There is no sense whatsoever of any expansion. We know it is happening because of the redshift, and we know that expansion accelerates because we feel the equal and opposite force of gravity. We know, thanks to Newton, that the rate of expansion felt as gravity is proportional to the mass of an object. In other words, expansion is a fundamental property of matter. You should be able to trace back over the sequence of steps so far and affirm that everything to this point is not a theory or personal claim to any kind of unique truth, but well-known physical facts. If you can't entirely agree with that, go back over it carefully until you can, or just bail out now. The rate of fall of objects near the surface of the Earth is 9.8 meters per second, exactly equivalent to the Doppler shift found in the Pound-Repke experiment to demonstrate a change in clock speed over the distance in the experiment. So what the physicists will not tell you, but you know now to be true, is that this change in clock speed is inferred from the Doppler shift. It isn't a matter of local experience. It's a matter of inference. So light is being accelerated somehow away from sources of gravity. This change also requires an equivalent inferred change in the length of a meter stick. So we know that when clocks shrink closer to the Earth, that the meter stick shrinks as well. And this also confirms that local changes in clock speed are inferred and not a fact of experience or of local observation, nor will they tell you that real cosmic expansion at an accelerated pace would create the equal and opposite effect of gravity within the universe according to Newton's third law of gravitation. This has already been proved. I'm not just throwing something out there and saying, hey, this is what, we know this. So despite the incessant posturing by the physicists, we see clearly that these experiments touted to prove Einstein's relativity and the Big Bang actually do nothing of the sort. Instead, they prove that gravity is caused by cosmic expansion while dimensions inside the universe are fixed. And if you're not sure of this, bail out now. Go back over this until you can understand it, or just forget it. So we affirm again that the observed increase in the velocity of light that matches the observed Doppler redshift equivalent to the acceleration due to gravity is logically accounted for only by the rate of cosmic expansion, or to be precise, the difference in rate of expansion between you and the Earth that equals 9.8 per second at the surface of the Earth, and that this force of gravity can be created only by the equal and opposite acceleration due to expansion on the cosmic level at the same rate as proved by Newton's third law. So forget about Einstein and go back to Newton. So it's no accident that the physicists tout that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate now, because if it didn't always do that, there would have been no force of gravity. And that's a fact. Note carefully that the force of gravity between you and the Earth is not the same as the rate of expansion of the universe, which is in proportion to the total mass of the universe, which is accumulated at the accelerated rate of little c per second to an enormous rate of acceleration, big C, because it increases, the rate of expansion increases incrementally at the rate of our speed of light. And we know that why light travels outside the universe. The only thing that defines the propagation of light and the speed of light is the expansion of the Earth itself. And that's what we see in the redshift. And so we know that every point in the universe is actually expanding at the speed of light. We can't even deny, no one can deny that the total mass of the universe must be responsible for the propagation of light in general, because that's what we see with so-called gravitational redshift. So indeed, we have at this point proved that the velocity of light is entirely due to cosmic expansion, neglecting any Doppler effects due to relative motion inside the universe. The universe as a whole expands at the rate of light because that is what defines the velocity of light, because it is propagated by expansion. And the Michelson-Morley experiment proves that, not Einstein's relativity. Now, if you feel yourself kind of drifting away and losing focus here, go back and come back again. These are difficult concepts to explain. And you may be asking yourself why, if the universe is expanding at an accumulating rate of big C, required to maintain gravity, and every moment that rate is far greater, additionally greater than the beginning value of little c, that the redshift between stationary objects on the physical level is constant. I mean, shouldn't our redshift be getting redder by the moment as the value of C increases by the moment? Well, no doubt it is, but since this effect occurs everywhere at once, we don't perceive it in our physical dimension, if I may use that term. And these different rates of recession actually define the gravitational potential between any of those 2 points in the universe. So anytime we measure gravitational potential, in other words, the acceleration due to gravity between any 2 points, because there's a different concentration of matter there, we know that that's the relative differential rate of expansion between those 2 points, or between those two celestial bodies. But at farther distances, the accumulated expansion on the cosmic level surfaces as an additional, well, I don't know. Let's think about it also. As redshift is increasing moment to moment within the universe as a whole, we don't see that. We just see the increase in gravitational potential. And like the force of gravity, the additional redshift diminishes with the square of distance from the source. So it very quickly actually dissipates to essentially nothing. So it would take considerable time for these fractional differences where bodies are a long ways apart for them to show up, to be measurable. But at farther distances, let's say intergalactic distances, we're talking about a long distance. Then the accumulating expansion on the cosmic level surfaces as an additional redshift, not accounted for by gravitation alone. And that is the progressive intergalactic redshift the Big Bangers claim as proof the universe is expanding. Well, if they were talking about the cosmic external universe, they would be correct, but they're not. Well, and then they wouldn't be correct, but they would be onto it anyway. But inside, dimensions are fixed. There's no change in distances between galaxies. So I'm not making this up. I know all these billion-dollar agencies will tell me I'm wrong and Einstein was right, but no, the universe is fixed. So it's not an accident that the physicists are now touting that expansion of the universe is accelerating based on correlation with distances based on standard candles. The universe has always accelerated on the cosmic level, but the measured distances between galaxies based on yardsticks rather than incorrect inference is still fixed. So it must be assumed that the Einstein crowd is not consciously lying, but only repeating misinformation stemming from failure to understand light is propagated outside of the universe, not in our internal dimensions. And if you don't believe Einstein and relativity, I'll tell you, you'll never graduate into a PhD in physics. So the voices are silenced. So we now see that light is propagated by expansion at all points of the universe as a property of mass outside the physical dimension. Or at least everything is expanding, but it's only observable outside physical expansion. So the universe is expanding into this void or ethereal realm. And that can be proved by demonstrating that the rate of transmission of light is equal in all directions. If light is propagated by expansion, it would be equal in all directions. So how do we know that I'm right about that? Well, the Michelson-Morley Experiment, okay, that also was claimed to be predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity, and it was the last nail in the coffin of any objectors to relativity. And this has been hammered into the heads of many generations since birth. But this Michelson-Morley experiment says nothing about relativity, or it could be said that relativity says nothing about reality. What it does demonstrate conclusively is that light is propagated outside the physical universe by cosmic expansion. And that's what I'm telling you, that if you logically step through all these things, it constitutes a fully acceptable proof in a rational mind. So the Pound-Repke experiment proves the acceleration of gravity to be equivalent to the opposite and equal force of expansion in an upper dimension. And it's not a mystical sort of thing. It's just like we were inside of a box or a balloon, and everything inside we're expanding. That's how we would see it. So the Pound-Repke experiment actually proves the acceleration of gravity to be equal to the opposite rate of travel of a beam of light leaving the Earth, and we can therefore discard any doubts that cosmic expansion is the cause of gravity. You might well wonder about a few other things. If every point in the universe is expanding at the speed of light, then why aren't we raisins torn to shreds? As absurd as that fact sounds, think back. If all points expand together, then all physical relations between points remain fixed. This is proved not just by the diagrams that I've made in this video, but by the experiments touted to validate Einstein. And if the universe really is expanding at an accelerating rate to sustain the force of gravity, why doesn't it bump into something? Well, understand that expanding into an infinite void is not of any consequence to the parts within, though I am of the opinion that the outer or upper or ethereal dimension where light travels is not a void, but it's filled with energy. At least it's filled with the light that is being propagated by expansion. So you might ask why it couldn't be true that distances between galaxies aren't increasing due to the expansion on the physical level, as would have occurred in the Big Bang. And I too held out that there could have been a Big Bang. I really believed it, but it would have meant that the value of Newton's gravitational constant G would have to diminish with time as expansion was occurring. But an examination of the units of G, length cubed over mass m times acceleration, speed of light per second, tells us it simply isn't possible. These units define the three fundamental constants of the universe: radius r, total mass m, and the rate of acceleration of cosmic expansion. There is no way to juggle these figures. You can look at them for yourselves. Nobody can, such that the universal force of gravity could be reduced or expansion take place. It doesn't happen. So this just confirms what we already knew from the Pound-Repke experiment in the length clock speed relation. And this is Einstein's famous blunder. Remember that? Look it up, Google that up. He made this mistake by making G a constant. Well, you know, he was always taking credit for something somebody else did. Is he talking about his G or Newton's G? Of course, people want Einstein to define reality, not the other way around. But even if he were touting his own G, Newton's G confirms there is no possibility any other equation could produce a different result. Despite the ongoing effort to twist the universe into Einstein's image, this is sufficient evidence that at least certain elements of Einstein's relativity were deliberately, fraudulently tailored to appease the Big Bangers. I'm sorry, but there just isn't any other answer. And if the rest of the world says that I'm wrong, you know, the rest of the world is wrong. So this is important. We're trying to educate people as to what really the universe is really like. And so now we're going to start talking about the origin and age of the universe and see if we can get some understanding on that. Thank you very much. Have a great day. So these are true, but they're difficult concepts to convey. And my facial muscles are numbed from Lyme disease. So be patient with me. It's a little difficult for me to talk. We want to talk now about the origin and age of the universe as we know it to be from the cosmic expansion model by Alan Foos. Since a Big Bang is out of the question at this point, I once thought it possible, though, given a measured value of big C, to extrapolate backwards to a point where the entire cosmic universe had shrunk to the point where it intersected with the value of little c, and mark an instant where the universe just magically popped into existence. However, it might have been created, probably not by a big bang, you know, but by a big compression of energy from the outer dimension into matter. But it finally came to me clearly that as the cosmic universe would shrink backwards at a linear incremental rate of little c going in reverse, so does the value of little c from the cosmic point of view also diminish. So even though this isn't internally perceived, but as both of them shrink together, it would mean that the radius r of the universe, also constant as measured within, does in fact change with cosmic expansion from the cosmic level. So it means that big C could never intersect with little c. Are you getting my point? You can't extrapolate backwards to a starting point. There is no starting point. I don't know if they call that asymptotic. Is that the word? I don't know if that's right, but they'll never connect with each other. So this means there never, ever, ever, ever could have or would have been a Big Bang. Big C could never intersect with little c. Even if everything shrunk to almost near nothing as reckoned by an outer fixed external dimension, everything would measure the same inside. That's the way space works. That's what the redshift is telling us. That's what we know to be true. It might not be fit within our current understanding of the way things work, but it is the way things work. This is a fact. So matter and energy are simply, there was never a beginning. There will never be an end to the universe. It was always at the same size. And it has neither a beginning nor an end. Matter and energy are simply recycled by the energy of external expansion, or whether the push is actually coming from inside matter, it's hard to say, but this is what the physicists call dark energy, cosmic expansion. Now, the C and B, cosmic microwave background, might be telling us something, but it isn't a Big Bang. Nice try, guys, but it just doesn't work. So, thank you for following me this far. I hope that you can understand it, maybe go back over it. All of these things are that are covered in the video, they're much better explained in the book Upper Land, Cosmic Expansion Model of the Universe. I'll give you that link below. And if buying it bothers you, you can snag a free PDF from the foosresearch.com website. And meanwhile, thank you for taking the time to watch the video. And I'm going to try to think of a way to do one of these Google surveys or something. So maybe you can give me a better assessment of your understanding. I don't care too much for your opinion, really, but how well you understood the presentation if you got to this point. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a great day.